In this demonstration, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to move my previously created Docker image into Azure Container Registry. That's another way to really host the image into a registry location and run them either locally or in Azure Container Instance. That's where your container runtime, everything is available in a pool of resources, and you can run any container image over there. Also, will run it locally. So let's see how that experience looks like. So if I go back into my demo machine and then I go to, let's say, this thing, and let me clear this up. And let's say, go to this Docker Hub also to show you that the image is up and running. So you can see the latest is available, and you can just copy the whole name from here, colon, and that's the image, right? Now, a couple of ways by which you can run. So let's try to run it locally first and see the experience, forgetting about like any other external kind of sources to run this from. Now, to run it locally, I can just use a docker run command. If I say docker run, it takes few things. First of all, it takes, let's say I open an interactive terminal, and then I will delete it. So if I use rm, it means that once it is out of this thing, it'll delete the container. It'll not store the files in my local machine, right? So if it's a temporary testing purpose, so I'm just spinning it up and deleting immediately. Otherwise, I have to come back and explicitly delete it. Okay, and then I say -p, and then I just map the port 5000 because ASP.NET Core uses 5000 port with port 80. I name this as sample web. Okay, and then I say that if everything is fine, this should go ahead and start our image. Now, just a thing, I need to specify the switch, that is name and then sample web. Now this should start the application. So you can see that immediately it shows that application is running. I can even see the interactive terminal, which is happening inside the container, right? That's what IT really signifies, interactive terminal, the TTY, whatever has shows in the bash window is visible in front of me in this. If I don't specify IT, you won't find anything as such as an output. Now, if I come out of that, it basically Control C, and then it kind of shuts down and the container gets deleted. To check whether container still exists, so if you say docker ps, it shows nothing. These are all live container. If you say the docker ps -a, you'll also see nothing because the rm clears up that thing. So this is running the container locally in my machine. Okay, let's try to run it from outside in some container runtime. And to do that, we can use, let's say, Azure Container Instance. So Azure Container Instance is something where you get pool of resources with a container runtime installed and configured, and you can host your container in that without really worrying too much about the local infrastructure, taking the backup, etc. Right? So let's say that I want to create a container instance with a name called um, Global Azure 2021. Okay, so if I just use a variable concept again, and then I use this, so that's a container instance name, and in the same window, I kind of have used the, let's see that if they still exist, if I still have access to the group name, I do not have. So let me pick it up again because I want to create it in the same resource group. Otherwise, I'll end up creating again and again. So let me, yeah, and then echo ACI name. They are here. So these two are important aspect. So what I can do now, I can now go ahead and create a Azure container registry. And to do that, what I basically may want to do is that I want to use this image, right? So that is my, let me increase the font size. So you can see that image name, right, in this repository. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use the latest tag. So I'll replace it. And I will use the port 80. And then I'll use DNS, let's say Contoso 234. If I have this command, so what basically it is doing, it is trying to create a Azure container instance and then give a name, a resource group, image is from wherever you want to host that image because it's a public image. You don't need to log in. Otherwise, you need to log in and then give the credential, pass it along, the port and the DNS. So by mentioning explicitly the DNS, it will have a public endpoint, right? So it does not allow me to really have that. So let me open a different window which has got some. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just have this command run it once. It will not work because I do not have those variables present, so it will fail. But it has got Azure CLI available. So what I'm going to do, I'm just quickly have my resource group variable added into that. Okay, and then I quickly have my container image name variable added into that. Okay, if I have these two and then run the previous command again, what happens, it will start creating the Azure container instance by pulling the image from the public repository, which doesn't require any login, and then creating those by mentioning the ports, etc. So if I go into back to my Azure portal, I will be able to see the resource group should now have something, a new option called Azure Container Instance. So let's just wait for the process to finish. So let me open that, and then it's still running. It should be not very long because these are all pool of resources available already. You just need some space allocated for you, and you go ahead and deploy that in the sandbox kind of environment, right? So it basically is a very nice experience. You do not need to install, maintain the runtime, etc., in your local machine. So if you see that it is running, while it is running, what I wanted to also do is that I wanted to show you the option where you can move this into a place where, let's say, Azure, it is created. So let's just quickly check that out. And then if I just refresh this, and you see that WG ACIA 2021, and then you can see that public URL. Let me copy that public URL, but also let me check the containers available in that, and you will be able to see the container and its status showing running, which means it is fine. Now what I can do in the browser itself, I can just paste the URL because it uses port 80, right? And it opens my sample web portal. That's the website which I created, right? So you can see that it is pretty much working fine without any trouble. And then if you, let's say, go back just to do a little overdo of the demo, what I wanted to do is that I wanted to, let's say, move into views, home, index, and then I say that welcome GA 2021. And if I just say save. Okay, and then if I just run the same Docker thing, it will build the Docker image with a recent change in the code, right? And after that build process is done, right, the DLLs and etc. are available, what happens is that it's gonna go ahead and push it to the layer. So if you want to give a different version, you should ideally be giving a different version, not the same one. And if you give the different version, then you have to spin up the ACI with a different image. But if you, let's say, do that, and then if you come over here into this, and I'm not sure if that will reflect immediately because I need to change the version. So you can see that you can pretty much do all these activities like making changes, changing the version number, and then pointing it again to the image, etc. So you can reload that. So for example, I just wanted to see if I can change the image. Um, if I, let's say, delete this thing, what happens if I delete the whole thing? And if I, let's say that, same thing, because I kind of delete it and then I spin up that image with that. So the container will be created with the new image that is latest, all right? And then it should now reflect the values from the code change which I made. So that's a kind of experience I wanted to share with you, is how you can have that container image pushed into a public repository and then load it locally, either locally or in container instance or container runtime platform like Azure Container Instance, right? You can even move this into, let's say, an Azure Container Registry, which is a sort of like either public or private registry as you would like to configure, and then have it from there. So we can also see quickly how that looks like. But let me go back into this thing and then see if I have refresh. Let me quickly check. RGG successful. So this is the URL. Sorry about it. This is the URL I have. Let me copy the URL and then try to paste in a new window. And then if I run this, it is saying not found. That's so I think there is some issue with the runtime, but the whole idea is that you should be able to run it, right? I even do not see that ACI. I don't know what exactly happened over here because it shows that it got created, but it is not here. So that's something might be wrong with the deletion process which I have done versus when I created this, right? Ideally, here you can see that it is showing that it got created with the same name in the same group, but it is not visible. But you got the idea that you can run the container anywhere you would like to. Now, let me also try to show you how you can use the Azure Container Registry to push it to, let's say, a registry like uh, Azure uh, ACR or Azure Container Registry, which is a specific one for Azure. Now, let me clean it up and then use a variable called ACR name, and then I will create a container registry. And if I just run this command, What it says that you create Azure registry with a name in a group, and the standard and admin enable is that it will have a username and password which will allow you to log in from CLI. And that CLI can be non-Azure CLI, which means that any standard CLI which takes Docker login, and you can provide the URL of the um, ACR, and then it should create that. So you can see that it's pretty fast because have it doesn't really have to do this is the registry URL, right? Now what happens when you say that I want to log into the Docker, so I say Docker login. Now I will do something from here, not the Visual Studio Code. Let's put it that way. So if I say cd samp ga, I think sample web, and then what happens if I say that I want to do a Docker login, and then provide that login name, and then the username generally is the name of the ACR. So it's WGACRGA 2021. Okay. And then the password, I need to go to my Azure portal to fetch for the password. I can even pass the password details over here. So let me just run a refresh here. And if I go ahead and get into ACR, container registry, you can see that access keys. By default, it will be only having this, but when you say enable admin, you get this. This is the password I'm going to use, and I pasted it and I run it, and it says logging successful. Now this time, what you need to do is that you need to provide the tag name. When you say Docker build with the tag thing, you need to provide the login. That's the ACR location. So that's the part of the image. Slash, you say sample web 2021, and then you say latest. Okay, if you do that, what happens, it goes ahead and creates an image with the name, and it will be available, right? And you say dot, because that's what the Docker build really works like that. Now, if you say Docker images, you'll find the image like this one, right? This one, which is the latest one. You copy this whole thing, and then what you can do, you can spin up a new ACI or run it from locally, taking that image as your reference. But to do that, you need to first push it. So if you say Docker push, and then give the full name of the image, including the tag, okay, and then say yes, it's going to go ahead and push it to my Azure registry, not to the Docker Hub. Now we can see that it's going into Azure registry. And once this whole thing is complete, what I am going to see here is that I'm going to see the so is I'm going to see the repositories. And then inside the repositories, I will see that sample web 2021, which I just now have pushed. And it also shows you what all, right, the latest you have right now, latest. And that's what you say Docker pull, and it pulls the image to your local machine. If you use this Docker pull in your local, let's say, command prompt, so to say here only, and then you do that, it's gonna go ahead and download that. So it is already there because it's my development machine from that where I pushed it. So it did not download anything. That's the effectiveness of the Docker thing. So it doesn't do same thing again and again. So with this, I want to thank you, and thanks for patiently watching. And we will come back with the AKS in our next part. how do you use this container registry to load an AKS.